Welcome to the Hourly Podcast. In today's episode, Katie Turner, General Manager of Perkins in Memphis, Tennessee, shares her passion for the success of her team members and the satisfaction of their guests. She emphasizes the importance of patience in the industry and the need to manage difficult customer interactions. Katie also discusses the challenges of staffing and the importance of finding the right fit for each shift, sharing her approach to the interview process and the specific qualities that she looks for in applicants. Enjoy.
This episode is brought to you by JoJo, an AI virtual recruiter powered by Sprockets. Designed for the hourly workforce, JoJo works 24/7 to source, screen, and schedule interviews with the best applicants for your business. JoJo helps reduce employee turnover and time spent hiring so you and your team can focus on other important tasks. To learn more, head to sprockets.ai/JoJo.
No, it's cool. So, Katie, thanks so much for being on the podcast. Where are you located in the United States?
I am located in Memphis, Tennessee.
Very cool. And we've followed you for a long time on LinkedIn. I've been
Mhm.
so excited for this conversation for a number of reasons. Tell the audience a little bit about you. What's your current role, and what are you passionate about in that role?
Okay, so currently I am the general manager of Perkins in Memphis, Tennessee. I am passionate about the success of my team members. I love to see people be promoted. I love to coach people along the way. That's what I'm really passionate about. I'm also passionate about our guests. So really just the people. I'm passionate about the people who come in and get this experience from our community and then our team.
Love it. And how long have you been with Perkins?
12 and a half years.
Did you start there as a crew member and work your way up to general manager, or did you jump around a little bit?
No, I started here as a crew member. I started as a host and then cross-trained to a server, then became a service leader, an assistant manager, and then a general
manager. Dang. Well, congrats on all of that. That's
Thank
awesome.
you.
That's awesome. What are some things that you've learned about like your DNA that allowed you to kind of like get through the industry and become a general manager? Like, what were some of those key personality traits maybe that kind of allowed you to get to where you are today?
So patience. Patience in this industry is a virtue. You have to be patient because you're working with all walks of life. You're out here and you have to observe the consumer's perspective, your perspective, your manager's perspectives, your team members' perspectives, and patience and being patient along that process will get you, you further than not.
Yeah, and too, I mean, we talk about it a lot, but patience with customers as well is really important. I think one of the most underrated skills in hourly workforce is being able to manage difficult customer sets that unfortunately, the people who are consuming our food and staying in our hotels aren't always the nicest to hourly workers, right?
That's true.
I'm sure you have some absolutely horror stories of customer interactions, but for the performance of staying and kind of gutting it out, but also managing customers, I could see how patience would be important. And to that note, like, does anything come to mind, like a customer interaction you've had or a crazy story kind of on the front lines that sticks out to you?
I mean, there have been honestly so many that it would be hard to pick from that pot. But I know we've gone from customers throwing water at the employees, it's getting the nicest employee on your team gets cussed out, and you're like, okay, you have to resolve those situations that make the customers happy and have a good experience after they just did that. And then you also have to resolve it to protect the morale of your team. So there are two different perspectives and two different angles that you have to step in and add the conflict resolution to.
Yeah, and talk to us a little bit about that. Like, let's say you have a relatively new member of your team. You're doing your best to kind of create, I don't want to say a bubble because I don't know if it's the right word, but you're doing your best to create like a good experience. And you're telling them like, hey, this is your first day. This is an awesome work environment. You get to hang out with friends. and then let's say on day 30, they have a horrible interaction with
Hmm.
a customer. What are some things that you tell them to get them feeling a little bit more comfortable or kind of back onto the projection that you want?
So I personally will tell them, hey, the common dining experience here lasts about 25 to 30 minutes. You have
Okay.
25 to 30 minutes with that individual. You have to be emotionally intelligent enough to determine when you're going to respond and how you're going to respond to that person. You don't
Mm,
allow to you don't give the power to someone else of how you respond and react to people. And
mm,
if you coach them and kind of bring it into perspective for them, because a lot of times their mind is just so focused on that one individual that they forget there's 20 other wonderful guests in your section right now. So you
mm.
can't let that one bad apple spoil the bunch. And 9 times out of 10 that works.
Right, right. Yeah,
Yeah.
because it's hard. My parents used to say this to me because when you see red, everything's red,
Hmm.
right? Where you have a bad interaction and all of a sudden it can become nuclear of
Yes.
of existence, right? And as frontline leaders, it sounds like you're taking a proactive approach of enabling them and calming them down so the rest of the day isn't red, rest of the week isn't red. And in
Yep.
the restaurant, as you know, people can just walk. They're like, hey, I'm
Hmm.
not working here. Like I'm going
Right.
somewhere else. So
Right.
no, totally get that. And talk to me a little bit about kind of the culture that you've built inside your restaurant. Like I think one thing that I was so excited about talking with you as a general manager versus a corporate entity that pushes down culture is you're like in the field. You're
Right.
living and breathing the culture, and every location is of course a little bit different, but how do you think about culture? Is it something that you work on every day? Is it something that's just kind of in the background that you hope to enhance? What's just your general viewpoint on that?
So cultivating culture is definitely a daily task.
Mm,
You can't set it to the side. Like it's something that you have to come in and first and foremost, you have to exemplify that. Like you're the head of the team, and the team will only go as far as you lead them. So through your actions, you have to be fair and consistent toward everyone. And then I never ask anyone to do anything I haven't done or would not do with them. So
right.
that's where you gain respect from your team, is if you're out there getting your hands dirty with them in the field. Like no one, yes, it's your job title, and yes, my job title is general manager, but who's to say tomorrow I might not be a dishwasher? If my team needs me to be a dishwasher on that day to help be most productive, then I'll be a dishwasher.
Right.
So
Right.
being fair and consistent across the board, I think that when people sit back and be like, hey, hey, she's cool with everyone, we're like a family.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
So
so great to hear, right? And clearly you've had a ton of success and all those good things. Do you feel like most general managers feel that way? Like, do you think that in order to become a general manager, you need to have that mindset? Or do you think that you're in the minority of kind of like the top performing, like heart on your sleeve, you'll do anything for the team?
I truly believe with all my heart, most general managers think that way. I think they do.
That's nice. Yeah,
I
that's
do. I
good.
think they do. I don't know what to say behind that.
Yeah,
All
well,
right.
I'm
I would
just
at least
wondering.
hope they do.
Right, right, right. And what I would ask is, do you have a network of general managers or maybe in a different ownership group, a different concept? Like where are you picking up those best practices and where are you learning kind of what to do day to day?
So honestly, with my 12 and a half experience, I have had some general managers that aren't, they didn't seem trustworthy. They didn't seem like, you know, I always took note mentally of how I didn't want to perform. And then you
Mm,
have one that you're like, dang, they're a hard worker. I want to be like them one day. And so
right.
it's kind of coming from both sides. Just a collective. I don't know how to
Yeah.
put
No, it
it.
totally, yeah. No, it totally makes sense, right? So it's like you took the good from the good managers and you learned from the bad. And you said, hey, over the course of the rest of your career, you're going to apply those things into the next step. No, I think that that's super logical. I think that makes a lot of sense, because one thing too that strikes me, I think that's interesting about you is like you seem young. I don't want to assume. My wife tells me never to do this, but you seem younger, right? And generationally, the people that come into quick service restaurant are
Mm-hmm.
younger, right? First
Mm-hmm.
job out of school, first job out of college, or maybe no school, no college, whatever. But you strike me as somebody that can really relate to the workforce, right? And
Yeah.
what's really funny and interesting about that is that might get harder for you over time as you get older, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, you've probably come across some general managers that generationally just don't get it, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like you got your entries that are putting out TikToks, and then you got the leadership that don't even know what TikTok is, right? So
Mm-hmm.
when you're thinking about growing your career and servicing this entry level group, how do you, or what would your advice be, maybe even to the older general managers beyond your years, of how to like stay in tune with like what's cool and like the culture of the workforce? What are your thoughts around that?
So you always have to have a line of communication open to your staff. Like,
Mm,
in order for me to understand you, I have to have a one-on-one conversation where I show you that I'm passionate about what you're talking about and I actually care. Because honestly, everyone has a story to tell, and it's up to us to actually be kind enough to listen. Everyone
mm,
wants to be heard. And a lot of times there's a saying that you have two ears and one mouth. So you're supposed to listen more than you talk. And a lot of times, if you just sit back and listen to your team, you'll hear what they're expressing that they don't like about the job, what they do like, what's going on outside of the job, and how it affects their personal life and how they bring it into the professional world, including trends and TikToks. And I can't tell you how many times the younger employees are like, Miss Katie, let's do a TikTok. And I'm like, okay, show me the dance.
yeah, that's
um,
so.
yeah.
I heard a phrase the other day when I was standing in line at a Baskin Robbins, and the people behind the counter were talking about Riz, like, oh, he's got a lot of Riz, and I felt like instantly I was 60 years old because I had no idea what they were talking about, right?
Uh-huh.
And what's so interesting, is about what you're saying is it can fit any company, any size, any industry, is opening that line of communication, right? And
Absolutely.
when you think about that, is it a scheduled time? Is it Friday, we all get pizza? Like, how do you kind of see that day to day?
So I approach it very raw and authentically. If a
Mm,
conversation happens, it happens. I think
got
that
it.
if you have a scheduled time, people kind of take a robotic approach and they say what you think they want you to say. So I want to know what's really going on in the back of their heads. So I don't, a lot of times it's not, there's no forewarning. Like, let's talk, let's have a chat.
Yep.
And then I have a mentorship program where each of my managers, I have 6 managers, and they will complete a form. They'll sit down with any team member that they choose, and they
Yep.
coach them for a month. They sit down and also have those raw, open, authentic conversations with them.
And what are some of those like takeaways that you've seen? Is it, hey, I learned that this person actually should be working the night shift? Is it change of perks? Like, give us like an example of two of like positive things that have come out of those conversations.
So, two of the questions that we'll ask them is identify your strengths, identify your weaknesses,
Yep.
so that as a person they can grow. And then it'll be things like simple as I want the carpets to be different. Like, that's something they'll choose. Or, hey, yeah, can I get 2 additional hours during the mid shift and work alone? It,
Hmm.
and then they'll say, hey, so and so doesn't do all of her side work to my liking. It'll be
Oh,
different things,
right.
but they're important to them. So my AirPods fell out. So
No,
we
you're good.
approach them with such importance, because if it's important to them, I want to at least hear them out.
Right. Right. Because if you give them a platform to speak and then you don't end up doing anything, that's a reflection too.
That's
Right.
correct.
But the minute they say something to you and you take action, it shows something, right? That you are
True.
in fact listening and all of those things. But bring us through, because everyone who's listening might not be familiar with the Perkins concept. How many employees do you have And is it quick service restaurant? Is it fast casual? Are you dining tables? Just walk us through the nuts and bolts.
So it's dine-in. I have 45 employees currently.
Wow.
Sometimes
Yeah.
it's more, sometimes it's less, just depending on the cycle. Um, what was the other question you asked me?
So it's dine in, 45 employees. What are the
Mhm.
hours? Is it breakfast, lunch, and dinner? Are you late night? What's that like?
So during the weekdays, it's 6 a.m. till midnight.
Okay.
Breakfast served all day, but we do have a lunch and dinner menu as well. And then on
Yep.
Friday and Saturdays, we extend our hours to 2 a.m. Um,
Wow.
yeah,
And what sort of
for the
unique
nightlife piece.
challenges? Yeah, yeah. What challenges do you have with that are unique? Like, because I imagine that, and a listener that's part of maybe uh, an IHOP or even like a McDonald's that might not have that extensive of a time frame. What are
Mhm.
some things or challenges you've experienced because of how late you guys stay open and that those sort of dynamics?
So it really depends. It's not a general specification, but I would say that the later it gets at night, whatever extracurricular activities people have going on, sometimes they forget that they just placed a Perkins order, and so they won't come pick it up. But we are
Oh,
still there for them if they wanted to. But speaking to this store specifically, 34% of our sales are to go. So that does open up the options within our community around us to DoorDash or Uber when other
right.
restaurants are closed for that time frame.
Interesting. And then from a staffing perspective, does it make it more challenging to find people for those hours, or is it the flexibility of being open more unlock other doors?
It's actually both. It unlocks me to be able to schedule more people and give my staff more hours, in turn more money.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah.
Staffing, it's normally the same people who volunteer. They're like, "Hey, I want to work night shift," and then they just are on night shift. And but I do give them the option because I would never just want to be thrown on a shift that I wouldn't want to work on. So I
Right.
reciprocate that to them, and the people who have chose to be on night shift are happy on night shift.
Right.
um,
Right.
that I'm aware of.
Yeah, because what I'm wondering is like, is it people typically that are, taking, let's just say 8 hours is like
Mm-hmm.
the block. Is it the
Mm-hmm.
last 8 hours, or is it they work through the day, Monday to Friday, and then they want to pick up extra shift because they want to buy the new NCAA football game,
Mm-hmm.
and so they pick up like the night shift on the weekends.
It's typically the same person. Like they want to have their day shift open, and then they just want to come in and work nights. Because we tried both methods. Because
Right.
like I said, I wouldn't want to just be stuck on night shifts if I didn't want to be there. So I'm like, hey, let's
Right.
do you 3 days daytime, 2 nights, and then they say it throws off their sleeping schedule, which is completely understandable.
Right.
So the people who are on night shift chose night shift, and
Yeah.
that's where they're comfortable at right now.
And when you're going out and recruiting, and I do want to touch on this with the limited
Okay.
time we have left, but when you're talking about recruiting, are you recruiting for specific shifts where you're like, hey, we need
Mm-hmm.
nighttime versus daytime? Or is it kind of a catch all and then through the process you determine where they're a best fit?
It is a catch-all determined along the process,
Got
for
it.
sure.
So if you need, let's say, 10 people walk out of a restaurant right now,
Hmm.
and you need 10 people really bad, what's like the first thing Katie does? Are you going to job boards? Are you doing referrals? Are you doing job fairs, putting up posters? What are some things that you've seen actually be successful in your location?
So it's a few things. We do use a resource online, um, job finders resource. We'll just say job finders,
Yeah.
and we'll get applications submitted online. However, I have found more effective to be Facebook posts and
Mm,
people who have worked for me in the past that have told me, hey, if you need an employee, please let me know. So I do have kind of a lineup of people who are waiting to be called. Um,
good.
Whether that's extended from the time we had that conversation or not, I'm not sure. But
Yeah. And
Facebook
do you
post and
find
personal.
Yeah, do you find different levels of quality based on where you post? So like job boards, let's say, not that great. Facebook's a little bit better, and like your personal networks, I would assume is like the best quality. Meaning like if you hire somebody, they'll take the job, they'll stay long term because they've been in the industry. Any thoughts on kind of like the hierarchy of quality based on the source?
That's really hard to say because anyone can put anything on their resume. And, until you're sitting across the table from someone and feeling that energy and watching their responses, like you truly don't know what you're getting. Yes, obviously the personal network, but I don't like exclusion. So it's like if I have 5 interviews and one of them just so happens to be the person I know, I'm not going to just pick the person I know over the excellent interview earlier, and
Right.
that's just the type of person I am. So
Yeah.
it is what it is.
Yeah, no, super interesting, right? Because I think about who other general managers that listen to the podcast that are looking for that next wave, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in the industry, turnover is rampant, and things
Mm-hmm.
happen where like a restaurant has to close down for 2 weeks, so then they
Mm-hmm.
lose all their employees that have to go find work elsewhere, and there's always kind of like these need for clusters of hires in the space. But really good perspective and love that. Talk to me a little bit about that interview process, right? So, it sounds like from what you just said, you do a lot of the interviewing. What are some things you look for? Like, what makes a successful person at Perkins?
So the obvious would be someone who can keep eye contact, because if you
Mm,
keep looking away, I feel like you're going to hide something, like you're hiding something. And then if you are interacting, like let's say while you're waiting for me to come to the table, and if you're smiling at people, like I'm watching, I want to see how you're interacting before I sit down across from you.
mm,
Like I said earlier, I don't know these people, so the determining factor would be the way you respond, your body language, your appearance. If you show up in pajama pants, I think that you're going to show up the same way, given the same effort in the job.
right.
Um, and whenever you ask a question like, how would you contribute to the hospitality environment here? And if they have to think extremely hard on it, either A, they're nervous, or B, they truly don't know. Like, and
Yeah.
you'll determine which one it is throughout over the course of the interview.
Yeah, love it, love it. All right, I have two final questions for you, and I
Okay.
end every podcast with this.
Okay.
One is, what was your first ever job? And the kind of the 1A is, were you terminated from that job or did you quit that job? And we've had,
So
just so for a frame of reference, we've had some absolute hilarious stories, some very inspiring stories, and just about everything in between. So we'd love for you to spill here.
okay, so my first ever job was Perkins.
Really? And you've been
Yes,
there the entire time?
I have.
Okay. I don't
I
know if
have.
her podcast will be out by the time yours does, but I just interviewed an amazing woman. Her name's Mary Mount, and she started at Wendy's, and
Hmm.
she's been at Wendy's for 38 years, and now she's the COO of Delight Restaurant Group, which is 225 locations.
It's
And I
awesome.
see so much of you and your journey in her. I'm gonna have to connect you guys because it's like so inspiring
Absolutely.
to me when people start and then they just stick with it.
Hmm.
And I think in the industry, there's negative connotations that like you jump jobs, but if
Hmm.
you are persistent and you work hard and you're loyal, there is a lot of upward mobility and a lot of opportunities. But
Absolutely.
what is next for you? I mean, GM is king of the castle.
Yeah.
What does someone like you what do you want to do next?
So the next step would be regional manager,
Mm,
be over multi units. And then I have other visions outside of operations. I love
mm,
operations, but I'm not sure that I would be in operations forever, if that makes
mm.
sense.
Yes,
Um, yeah,
I
so
love it.
I love
Yeah,
the research and learning development department, and I love that department. So that's
that's
all I'll say
awesome.
about that.
No, thanks so much for sharing. I mean, like it's with when we speak with franchisees and director of ops, I mean, like the questions are always, how do we keep our good general managers, and when we invest in them, how can we make sure they don't leave, right?
Yeah.
Because like it's like the age old saying, it's like, well, what happens if we invest in people and they leave? And then the next person says, well, what happens if we don't invest in them and they stay? There's more risk, right? Because you've got
Yeah.
to level people up, and it's cool to kind of hear you having aspirations to stay at the company
Mhm.
and do amazing things. So Perkins, if you're listening, let's get Katie set up. I love it. No, we really appreciate your time. No, I don't have any other questions for you. I guess last question would be, let's say tomorrow I work as my first shift of a general manager. What's the first piece of advice you'd give me?
Um, First and foremost, make yourself comfortable in your own environment and then
Mm,
flourish that out into your team. So everyone's comfortable and everyone loves to come to work and no one is like, oh my goodness, it's Monday, I have to go to work. Like, yeah, a job is a job, but it doesn't have to be a dreaded job.
love,
Put your passions into it and learn
love
your
it.
team's passions.
Love it. So in a few years, we'll have to do this again, part two. We'll see where you are in the world, and I have a feeling that it'll be all amazing for you. But again, thank you so
Awesome.
much, and we'll have to reconnect soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me.